One of our subscribers named Laura shared this story with me, and the moment she read that group text 3 days before Christmas, she said something inside her finally went quiet. 3 days before Christmas, I was wrapped in a blanket in my small, drafty apartment when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a group message from my mother, Sarah. I expected a reminder about what dish to bring to the Henderson family gala. Instead, the text was short. Cold. Final. We have agreed it's better if you don't attend the gala this year. Nicholas is uncomfortable with your attitude. A second later, another notification popped up. My sister Mara had hearted the message. I stared at the screen, waiting for the ache to bloom, waiting for tears. They didn't come. No crying, no pleading, no why. Just a sharp, almost surgical clarity. I typed a single reply. Perfect. You won't be seeing me again either. Then I looked up at Julian sitting across from me, watching with that steady, unreadable intensity. He nodded once. It begins. Before I tell you what I did next and how I turned their flawless Christmas into something they still wake up from in cold sweats, drop a comment. Where are you listening from right now? I want to see how far this story travels. I set the phone down. The message still glowed on the screen. Julian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on mine. He didn't give me empty advice about forgiveness, didn't say, family is everything, didn't suggest I rise above it. He said 2 words, it's time. I really looked at him then. To my family, Julian was just the quiet boyfriend who drove an aging sedan and barely spoke at dinners, a nobody. But I saw the man who held me while I shook from nightmares about Nicholas. I saw the man who quietly, methodically helped me build walls around my life while my family tried to dismantle it. I stood. The blanket slid to the floor. I walked to the closet and pulled out the garment bag I'd hidden 3 months ago. I wasn't packing to leave. I was suiting up. The dress inside was sharp and deliberate, deep emerald green, the kind of color that doesn't ask permission to exist in a room. Julian stepped out of the bedroom in a suit that looked understated but wasn't. Perfect tailoring, dark, expensive fabric. He slipped on the glasses he only wore when negotiating something significant. The quiet boyfriend disappeared. In his place stood someone dangerous. We didn't speak as we prepared. The silence wasn't heavy. It was focused, like soldiers checking weapons before stepping onto a battlefield. As we drove toward the Henderson estate, city lights streaking past, my thoughts drifted backward. Why had they chosen Nicholas? Why had my parents looked at the man who left bruises on my arms and seen a son, while looking at me and seeing a problem? I remembered coming home one night with a black eye. I had stumbled into the kitchen, desperate. My mother didn't react with horror. She reacted with irritation. She said I must have provoked him. She said Nicholas was under pressure as a CEO, that I needed to be more understanding. Back then, I believed they were blind. I thought if I explained it clearly enough, if I showed them the pain, they would wake up. But as the road curved toward the mansion, I finally allowed myself to see the truth. They weren't blind. They were bought. To admit Nicholas was a monster would mean admitting they traded their daughter for security, that their comfort, their status, their freedom was financed by my suffering. The mind is brilliant at self-preservation. When reality is unbearable, it rewrites it. In their story, Laura is unstable, Nicholas is successful, order is preserved. It was easier to sacrifice my sanity than their lifestyle. That realization didn't make me cry anymore. It made me furious. Julian's hand rested calmly on the gear shift. We weren't coming to beg for seats at their table. We were coming to foreclose on it. The iron gates of the Henderson estate opened as Julian's modest sedan rolled over the gravel. To outsiders, the place looked like a dream, a sprawling colonial mansion glowing in golden light, wreaths in every window, a 2-story Christmas tree dominating the foyer, luxury SUVs and sleek German sports cars lining the driveway like trophies. But I didn't see a home. I saw a shell corporation, a monument to tax manipulation and shadow loans. a beautiful facade hiding structural rot. We climbed the steps. Winter air stung my cheeks. Inside, crystal clinked softly and laughter drifted outward. I didn't knock. I opened the door. The room went silent. The string quartet stopped mid-note. 50 heads turned. Cousins, business associates, neighbors. People who had spent years hearing stories about how unstable and difficult I was. They stared at me like I had returned from the grave. My mother moved first. No hug, no relief. She marched across the marble floor, heels striking like gunshots. She grabbed my arm, nails digging through fabric. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "We told you to stay away, and why did you bring him?" Her eyes flicked to Julian with naked disdain. In her world, he was invisible, an inconvenience, a servant who had wandered through the wrong door. The crowd shifted. Nicholas emerged. I'll give him this. He looked immaculate. A tuxedo worth more than my first car, a glass of amber scotch in his hand. He moved with that easy, predatory confidence of someone who has never truly faced consequences. He didn't glare. He smiled. He walked straight up to us and ignored me completely. Stopping in front of Julian, he said loudly enough for the entire room to hear, "You must be the driver." He pulled a crumpled $5 bill from his pocket and slid it into Julian's breast pocket. "Why don't you move your car around back? You're blocking the Porsches." My father, Gregory, appeared behind him, laughing loudly. "You tell him, son," he said, clapping Nicholas on the shoulder. "Good help is hard to find." Polite, cruel laughter rippled through the room. Mara smirked behind her champagne glass. I felt the old reflex rise, the instinct to shrink, apologize, retreat. Then I looked at Julian. He didn't bristle, didn't argue. He glanced down at the $5 bill, then back at Nicholas, and smiled. Not warmly, politely, like a wolf observing a sheep explain why it shouldn't be eaten. "I'll keep this safe," Julian said softly. My mother herded us toward a corner table, isolating us like a stain she couldn't quite scrub out. She thought she was minimizing the damage. She didn't realize she had just locked herself in a room with the only people who held the detonator. They believed they were hosting royalty. They didn't know the kingdom had already been seized the morning before. Dinner arrived. White-gloved servers placed filet mignon before guests who had quietly bartered their ethics to afford it. I didn't touch my plate. I watched my father, Gregory, stand up and tap a silver spoon against his crystal wine glass. The sharp, ringing sound cut through the murmur of the room. The conversation died. He looked around, a king surveying a kingdom that was already burning. He just couldn't smell the smoke yet. He raised his glass to Nicholas, to the man of the hour. Gregory boomed, his voice thick with unearned pride. "To Nicholas, the son I never had." He paused for the polite laughter that followed. It came obedient and hollow. Then his eyes found me in the back corner. They didn't hold love. They held a challenge. "You know," he continued, his voice dropping to a theatrical hush, "in this life, some children drain us. They take and take until there is nothing left. And others sustain us. They step up, they save us. We are blessed, truly blessed, to have Nicholas steering this ship." The applause was thunderous. Nicholas didn't look humble. He looked like a cat that had just swallowed a canary and was waiting for dessert. He leaned back, one arm draped over the back of his chair, basking in it. He smiled at my father, a conspiratorial grin that said, "We own this world." He thought he had won. He thought this public adoration was the final nail in my coffin. He thought I would shrink away, shamed by the comparison, crushed by the weight of their disapproval. But I wasn't shrinking. I was calculating. I remembered every time my father had compared us. "Why can't you be more like Nicholas? Nicholas knows how to handle people. Nicholas is a leader." They had worshipped the hand that beat me because it also fed them. They had traded my safety for his silence. They broke me then, stripping away my voice piece by piece. But tonight I found it again, and it was sharper than steel. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the marble floor. The sound cut through the applause like a gunshot. Heads turned. My mother's eyes widened in warning, her mouth forming a silent "sit down." I didn't sit. I projected my voice to the back of the room. "Is he the savior because he paid your bills, Dad?" I asked. My tone was conversational, deadly calm. "Or is he the savior because he knows about the tax fraud?" The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of 100 people holding their breath at once. My father's face went from flush to pale in a heartbeat. The wine glass in his hand trembled, sending a ripple of red liquid dangerously close to the rim. Then the gaslighting started. It was almost impressive how fast they switched gears. It was a reflex, a defense mechanism honed over decades. My mother stood up, knocking her napkin to the floor. "She is unstable," Sarah cried out, her voice shrill with panic. She turned to the guests, her hands fluttering, pleading for them to ignore me. "This is why we didn't invite her."
"She is having an episode. She is imagining things," my sister Mara chimed in, sneering from across the room. "God, Laura, you are embarrassing yourself. Sit down or get out. You're ruining everything." They were good at this. For years, they had made me question my own reality. They had made me think the bruises were my fault, the insults were jokes, the neglect was love. But I wasn't buying their version of reality anymore. I was holding the receipts. Nicholas stood up. He didn't look amused anymore. The mask of the benevolent sun slipped, revealing the predator underneath. He walked toward our table, his movements slow, deliberate. He was trying to intimidate me. He was trying to make me small. "You are making a scene, Laura," Nicholas said, his voice low, dangerous. He stopped a few feet away, looming over me, blocking the light. "Maybe you need another lesson in respect. Maybe you need to be reminded of your place." He raised a hand. It was subtle, just a twitch, a shift in his shoulder, but I knew what it meant. I knew the weight of that hand. I knew the pain it promised. But he forgot one thing. I wasn't alone in the dark anymore. Nicholas snapped his fingers, a sharp, entitled sound that echoed in the silence. Two security guards, burly men in ill-fitting suits who had been hovering by the entrance, stepped forward. "Get them out," Nicholas ordered, not even looking at them, his eyes still fixed on me with that cold, dead stare. "And if she resists, drag her." That was the moment the air in the room changed. It wasn't me who moved, it was Julian. He didn't lunge, he didn't shout, he simply stepped between me and Nicholas. It was a fluid, practiced motion, like a door slamming shut on a draft. He reached into his jacket pocket, the same pocket Nicholas had stuffed the $5 bill into, and pulled out a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. He put them on. It was a small gesture, but the transformation was absolute. The quiet, submissive driver vanished. In his place stood a man who looked like he could buy and sell everyone in this room before breakfast. The security guard reached for my arm. Julian didn't look at him. He just held up one hand, palm out, without turning his head. "Touch her," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave, smooth and heavy as lead, "and you will be facing assault charges before your next paycheck clears, assuming, of course, that the checks don't bounce." The guard froze. Nicholas blinked, his sneer faltering for a fraction of a second. "Who do you think you are?" Nicholas spat. "You're the help. Know your place." "My place," Julian smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark in a tank full of goldfish. He opened the leather briefcase he had carried in unnoticed. He pulled out a single heavy cardstock business card and slid it across the white tablecloth. It stopped perfectly in front of Nicholas's scotch glass. "I am not her driver."
Julian said, his enunciation crisp, cutting through the room. I am Julian Vance, senior partner at Sterling and Vance. We specialize in high-risk corporate liquidation and distressed asset acquisition. A gasp rippled through the room. Even the cousins in the back knew that name. Sterling and Vance didn't handle traffic tickets. They dismantled corporations. Nicholas stared at the card, his face draining of color. And right now, Julian continued, I am acting as legal counsel for the sole lien holder of the property you are currently standing in. Lien holder? My father sputtered, standing up so fast his chair tipped over. What are you talking about? I own this house. I built this estate. No, Dad, I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the file, the thick red folder I had carried with me like a shield. I threw it onto the table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud right next to the prime rib. You don't own it. You hid it. I looked at the guests, raising my voice so every donor and neighbor could hear. My parents set up a shell company, an LLC, to hide this mansion from the IRS. They thought they were clever, but to keep up this lifestyle, to keep buying the cars and throwing these parties, they needed cash. So they took out shadow loans, high interest, predatory. I looked at Nicholas. Loans that he arranged for them. Nicholas looked like he was going to be sick. He knew exactly what was in that folder. They defaulted 3 months ago, I said, my voice steady, cold. The bank was about to foreclose, quietly. They didn't want the scandal. So yesterday morning I made a call. I bought the promissory note. I bought the debt. You can't do that, my mother whispered, her hands trembling. You don't have that kind of money. I do now, I said, and because you signed a commercial loan agreement for your little tax shelter LLC, you agreed to a confession of judgment clause. I pointed to the document on top of the pile. Do you know what that means, Gregory? It means you waived your right to a trial. It means that the second you missed a payment, the lender, me, could seize the assets without a judge, without a hearing, and without a warning. I leaned over the table, placing my hands flat on the wood, looking my father dead in the eye. I own the debt. I own the LLC, and I own the chair you are sitting in. Nicholas laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a wet, ugly sound that bubbled up from his chest, breaking the tension in the room like a dropped plate. He shook his head, looking down at the file I had thrown, then back up at me with a pitying smirk. He wasn't beaten. He was just getting started. That is very clever, Laura Nicholas said, picking up his scotch again. He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving mine. Buying the debt, seizing the LLC? Very dramatic, but you forgot one thing. You forgot why your parents let me in the door in the first place. He reached into his tuxedo jacket. For a second, the room flinched, expecting a weapon, but he just pulled out a flash drive. He held it up, letting it catch the light from the chandelier. Nicholas leaned in, his voice low but carrying. Evict us, and I send this drive to the IRS, the DA, and every newsroom in the state. My mother sobbed. My father froze. Your parents didn't just hide the house, he continued. They hid millions in income, laundering, wire fraud, tax evasion. Mara signed the checks. If I fall, they all go to federal prison. He stepped closer, so call the police, evict us. But no, you'll be the daughter who put her parents in chains. The room went silent. My parents looked at me, pleading. I smiled. I was counting on that. Nicholas frowned. I needed you to threaten me out loud in front of witnesses to admit you're extorting my family. I nodded to Julian. He produced a blue-bound document. Document 2, the last will and testament of Eleanor Henderson. My father stammered. She died broke. No, I said she died smart. Julian read. A $5 million estate placed in a protective trust. It unlocks only upon irrefutable proof that Laura's immediate family conspired to extort or endanger her for financial gain. Nicholas went still. Grandma didn't leave me poor, I said. She left me a trap. I pointed to the blinking red light on Julian's lapel. We've been recording since we walked in. You just confessed to tax fraud and extortion. I stepped closer. You didn't checkmate me. You unlocked my inheritance. His face drained. Now I can fix the tax problem, I added, or let you all rot. My mother rushed to me, desperate. We did it to protect the family. Now you have the money. We can fix this. I looked at her calmly. You didn't protect the family. You protected your comfort. You sold me for peace. I turned to security. I own the LLC that pays you. These people are trespassers. Remove them. Julian nodded. The guards moved. Nicholas lunged at me. Julian caught his wrist and dropped him to his knees. Get them out. No! They were dragged into the snow, dressed for a party that was over forever. Merry Christmas, I said, and closed the door. The mansion fell silent, clean, empty. Julian exhaled. So, you own a mansion? No, I said, tossing my old photo into the fire. I own freedom. Later, I opened my email. I already had copies of the records. Julian hesitated. You've won. You don't have to. Winning isn't escaping, I said. It's stopping them from doing this again. I hit send. Then we went home to a small apartment, warm with honest money. My inheritance wasn't $5 million. It was the ability to walk away and never look back. If you've ever had to burn a bridge to save yourself,